This is your weekly tech recap with Jamal Abbott. News and insights about the tech world in plain English. Thank you for listening. Episode number 7, and we are going to jump right into the news. Today's episode, we learn more about the Sprint and T-Mobile deal. It has been delayed. AT&T announces their Narrowband IoT network, which went live this week. We also have some updates from Facebook and Twitter for some platform changes and some content deals. And then we have your favorite Q&A. The Sprint T-Mobile deal delayed. According to a Securities and Exchange Commission filing, it shows that the deadline has been extended by the companies to July 29th of 2019. Both companies are still confident the deal will go through, as we've been reporting here in the last few weeks. But there's still questions as if the merger will actually pass as structured, but the deal still has to go through the regulatory process. Now, the deal itself has been approved by different public and utilities commissions in different states, but we're still waiting for the Department of Justice to review this deal. And there's also some other components that need to be signed off just through this whole regulatory process. Both companies, T-Mobile and Sprint, that the deal will go through as structured, and they're saying that they need this to compete in this market for consumers, to compete against AT&T and Verizon. But opponents of this deal say that this will actually limit competition. This deal will actually eliminate jobs and limit competition, which T-Mobile and Sprint have denied. The opponents of this deal have also stated that this will actually hurt the rural community who depend on these wireless services to provide to their community. And both Sprint and T-Mobile stated that if they were to combine, they would actually provide some rural internet services for this community through their 5G network, which they hope to bring out here in the near future. We continue to monitor the story, so there's still not a whole lot of changes. This process is going to take a little time for it to go through, but this date has been pushed back, and we will continue to monitor the story. AT&T's NB-IoT network goes live. Now, before we get into this story, we need to define a couple terms just so we're not lost here. And we'll start off with NB-IoT. So NB stands for Narrowband, IoT stands for Internet of Things, and then Internet of Things is the term used to describe utility meters, sensors, smart appliances, and then other devices that need to connect to the internet. So they're not quite like a laptop or a smartphone, but these are things that need network connectivity. And then AT&T has actually made a dedicated network for these devices, mainly for businesses, so that they can monitor these devices that are out there in remote places. Now, this network complements an existing network that AT&T has in place, which is an LTE-M type network. And then really these networks are both designed for low power consumption type devices. And then these devices ultimately don't need to transmit a whole lot of data at a time, and they don't need a constant connection to the network. So network is specifically designed for these devices. And then the Internet of Things, so this phenomenon with these devices connecting to the network, this is expected to actually explode here in the next few years. We're talking about a couple billion devices that are going to be connected and then needing internet connectivity to function. Now, T-Mobile has the first bragging rights to bring in NB-IoT to the market. So they launched their nationwide network around this time last year. And then Sprint is also in the process of testing their NB-IoT network. And then while Verizon is also in the works to develop their NB-IoT network. So this is interesting because once upon a time, I actually supported the network for sensors and weather meters and then alarms, but this was not a wireless network, but actually like a point-to-point network. So in the previous job, my responsibility was to support the circuits that connected these devices, and then we would actually have connections that would lead up to the local phone company, go into these devices, and then when they worked pretty well. They got the job done, and they transmitted the data that the actual customers who had the alarm devices or the modems that needed to transmit data, they worked okay, but when they didn't work, it was a pain in the butt to troubleshoot. So sometimes we would spend either hours or just several days and weeks trying to get these point-to-point networks back up and running. And then, if we were lucky enough, we had a technician with a local phone company that was knowledgeable enough who was able to troubleshoot and then get the service back up and running. But the problem with the networks that I was supporting at the time was that these were analog networks, and then even with the local phone company, sometimes they didn't have the resources to actually troubleshoot and then maintain these point-to-point networks for these type of devices. So for me at the time, I didn't really know what was beyond these dedicated wired networks, but I've later learned that these devices could easily transmit and then receive data over wireless networks. So this is the next evolution of those former networks that were previously wired, and now they're being handled through the internet and through the Internet of Things, these types of devices. So this is going to explode here in the next few years. And if you think about how many wireless devices you have, maybe in your home or in your office, for myself personally, I counted this up and I have at least about 10 wireless devices, and then they consume quite a bit of data. And not to mention the streaming that we do for some of the devices that are connecting to a Netflix or Hulu. But this is a phenomenon that's going to be coming here real soon. There's going to be quite a few different devices that are needing internet access, and then it's also going to help too because there's going to be some places that are out there in some remote parts of the world that need some sensors, or they need the ability to have something tracked. They can't necessarily do it because of the lack of connectivity, but with these networks coming online from some of the major phone companies, from the major wireless providers, and then some other players out there that aren't too well known, it's just an opportunity for those services to be provided, and then for new problems to be solved because of that. So I'm excited about this, and I can't wait to see if this prediction, and I think it will, but I can't wait to see when this all comes about. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Our next story, we have some updates from Facebook and Twitter. Facebook had a conference, their FA conference that they usually have once a year, and they made some pretty significant announcements concerning their platform. And Facebook has traditionally been the place where you share with your friends, with your families, and then they have encouraged in the past to share with some strangers. Just so the idea was to be open, to share and to connect, make some new friends and connections, that kind of stuff. They have ran into some problems with privacy, with data being leaked, and then some other instances where there's been some bad characters that have misused the platform, and then this has lost trust of the users of the platform itself. So the big move, and this has been announced by Mark Zuckerberg, they're moving from open communications to private communications. And then Mark Zuckerberg described this as going from shouting in the middle of the town hall to having these private conversations with your community. So this is a pretty significant move. And then because of this vision, they've actually changed the way the users are going to be interacting with Facebook. So if you have noticed, your Facebook feed has been updated, and now the center of attention now is centered around groups that you may be a part of, and then events. Now the news feed, where you would see your friends or maybe some other businesses or some other maybe celebrities that you're following, so that news feed where you scroll and then check for the status updates, that's actually going to be less of a focal point as the groups and the events are more prominent in your display and in your feed. So because of that, it's going to change the behavior of the users, and like we just talked about, they want to move away from this open communication to more of a private and then more intimate communications experience. The other announcement that came from this that we'll highlight on this show is that the Messenger app, so this is the private communication app for users of the Facebook platform, that got completely redesigned and updated and is actually a lot quicker to open up and then shoot messages to one another. So they removed a lot of the bloat, and then they really want to emphasize speed and then a great user experience. So they've actually done a pretty good job of that and getting that up and running as quick as they did. Now, the future of Facebook and then some of the other assets that they own, such as WhatsApp, such as Instagram, the move is to make those more of a private communications experience, emphasizing more on stories and then less on permanent content. So like your posts that you would put up on Instagram, they're more focused on just having that natural experience where you and I are talking right now, but the conversation isn't recorded or it's not captured, and then we can look back on it 5 years from now and say, hey, what were you thinking at that time? So they're getting less away from that and having it to where people are more willing to share and open up with one another if that experience isn't going to be recorded forever. So it's a big change in how this social network is operating and then how it's going to evolve in the future. So more private communications and less open communications. One of the other things that they mentioned too was for the future to actually integrate the WhatsApp, the Instagram, and then the messaging services. So these messaging platforms, they're looking to integrate that all into one common experience to where if I'm on WhatsApp, I can message to a Facebook user if I'm already connected with them, or vice versa, being able to message from Instagram over to a WhatsApp user. So that one's going to take a little bit time for that process to get all integrated and for that one to be a more seamless experience, but it is coming down the pipe. And they're also looking to beef up encryption for some of these platforms that don't currently have it. So WhatsApp and Instagram, its direct messaging service, those don't currently have encryption, but it looks like they're going to be deploying that at some point in the future. So we'll keep an eye out on that. So those are some of the big changes. There's some more updates that came from this, and then you can jump over to jamalabbott.com and look at this particular episode's show notes, and then we'll provide a link to the updates and for the list of changes that are happening in the Facebook world. Now, separate from this, Twitter made some news this week, and they have made some announcements for some new deals and then to make some extensions for content. And we'll just kind of run through this just real quick. So Twitter has announced a new video deal with Univision, and this is to serve the Spanish-speaking audience for Univision. So Twitter products and services that are integrated with Univision. They've also either extended or created some new partnerships with sports media entities such as the NFL, ESPN, and MLS. Also with some news outlets, so the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Time, as well as some entertainment. So with Live Nation, they're talking about being able to do a number of concerts and other special features. So that's going to be available for the Twitter community, as well as Viacom. And Viacom has gotten a lot of attention out here recently. So we learned about Viacom partnering with T-Mobile and some other entities. So they've partnered with Twitter, and they're going to be providing their content, and they have brands such as BET and MTV. So that's going to be available as a part of the Twitter experience. So it's either going to be part of Twitter itself, or maybe even seeing Twitter being integrated into that video content, maybe, you know, in an existing show, or maybe through special features. But just know that Twitter is going to be more part of those entities and those deals that have been struck here. So Twitter is interesting. Out of all the social networks, according to the experts, this one has had issues with staying relevant. So Facebook has evolved, Instagram has evolved, and some of the other social networks have evolved. But Twitter, for the most part, has largely stayed the same, and they haven't really, up to this point, they hadn't really made a whole lot of changes when it came to their core offering, which is being able to provide short messaging services for their users. But it's good to see that they're making some deals with some of these media outlets, and it helps them stay relevant. So a lot of politicians, a lot of the folks that cover the news and media, Twitter is their number one go-to resource, because it's not really tied to like an update that you would have to make from your Instagram account. So for instance, if I want to communicate and share something on Instagram, I have to attach it to a picture. You don't necessarily have to do that with Twitter. As long as you're familiar with social media, you can send out a tweet, you can do a live video with that, or you can do a short video, pre-recorded, or send out, anything with Twitter, and it doesn't have to be attached to like a specific action item like you do with an Instagram. So this will be interesting. When it comes to sports, people always have an opinion, and they're jumping on Twitter to do live tweets and then kind of give their play-by-play analysis. And even with other media events, such as like a concert or maybe like an award show, folks are definitely tuning in and then providing their thoughts about what's going on in real time. So this is definitely the platform that would be most advantageous for the folks that are in live media and then providing these types of services. So I think it's pretty neat to see Twitter is more relevant and being used as a great tool because of that. Now, as far as Facebook goes, this is interesting. I'm curious to see how people are going to adapt to this. And the interesting thing about Facebook too, it's been around for so long, and to me, one of its strengths is its ability to adapt. So if you think about the platforms that were out before, so for instance, MySpace, I remember a long time ago when I had a MySpace account, that was the thing to do, to update your MySpace account, to add music, to customize the graphics and things of that nature. And then it just, it wasn't cool anymore. But, Facebook has been in this area for a long time, and they've been able to adapt and overcome to the different changes. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing here with this move from open to private communications. And I think they're onto something. Facebook has their ears to the ground pretty close when it comes to their user needs, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens here with this. So I'm keeping an eye on it, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we are transitioning to the question and answer session. If you want to ask me a question, you can hit me up on all social media channels, and it's Jamal Abbott. If you want to shoot me an email, it's jamal@thephoneguy, and that's THA phoneguy.com. Shoot me an email there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Technology, customer service, business, you name it. Shoot the question over, and I will try to get this on the show. This first question comes from Hal, and he asks, I occasionally see a 5G replace my LTE on my phone. Does this mean that I have 5G speeds? So Hal, unfortunately, this does not mean that you have 5G speeds. So for you to see that, you may have an AT&T smartphone. So what AT&T has done, they have actually branded their advanced LTE network as 5GE. So you'll see the 5G on your smartphone, then you'll see like a little E right next to that. And that 5GE stands for 5G evolution, and that's AT&T's way to say that you are on the evolutionary path going towards 5G. Now, there are some speed increases with this 5GE network, but the true 5G networks that are out there, we're talking about the ability to download at, going up to 1 gigabits per second, or on the high end of things, up to 10 gigabits per second. Those networks aren't quite out yet. So AT&T, as of this recording today, they're in 19 different markets, but they're still in the process of deploying the actual 5G network out. So we're not looking at 5G being available nationwide, not until sometime in 2020 and beyond. But for now, you don't have 5G service like we were just talking about, but 5GE, which is faster than the traditional LTE or the 4G networks, but it's just named differently because this is what AT&T wanted to do to differentiate themselves from the rest of the market. So hope this answers your question, but you won't have 5G yet, not until those networks come online, and not until you get a 5G smartphone. And there's only about one of those that are actually out right now, with more to come sometime later on this year and beyond. And then you would need to have the appropriate plan to support your 5GE service. So need a couple things first before you can actually have that in your possession. It'll come, but not today. This next question comes from Tudor, and the question is, why aren't customer services giving you the same advisor on repeated calls? So great question. And this all depends on the company that you're calling to. And if it's a large company, so maybe let's just say that they have offices, or maybe they have branches all over the world, or maybe all over the country, more than likely they have taken their customer service and then outsourced that to another third party. And then when those calls are outsourced to those third parties, sometimes they're call centers, and they could be call centers in the United States. They could be a call center overseas, maybe somewhere in India, maybe somewhere in Europe or some other country. And usually when those calls go into like an 800 number or a toll-free number, if they go into those, they're in a massive call center, and then the call center software will actually distribute the call to the next available agent. So if you were to get the same person, it could be that maybe that person is the only one manning the phones at that one point in time, or you are actually talking to a company that has not sent their calls to a call center. So for instance, if I were to get the same representative, I would expect them to be a smaller business, like a smaller mom and pop shop. And I've actually talked to certain representatives to where they only handle specific accounts. So for instance, if you happen to be part of the federal government, and then you're calling in to get support on your federal government product or service, sometimes these companies have dedicated reps that only handle specific types of accounts. And so they may dedicate a small group of people to handle those accounts because they're the most knowledgeable about that. But for the most part, you're probably going to be connected to a call center, and this call center is going to distribute the calls based on who's available, who's skilled in the thing that you're requesting support for. And you're more than likely not going to get that person if you call in at repeated times. The smaller the business, or the more personal they want to get with you and talking to you and understanding your problems, the more chances you'll get with actually talking to the same person, or maybe talking to the same group of people in the same office to answer your type of questions. And the last question comes from Andrew, and he asks, why is audio on phone calls so bad? It's 2019, but it hasn't seemed to be improved in years. So, Andrew, great question. And this one is a little complicated, so I will try my best to give you a simple answer. The reason why call quality hasn't improved for phone calls is because of the networks themselves. The traditional phone networks are encoded for a certain quality, and then that quality it stays consistent through the network. And usually, if I'm calling from one end of the phone call and I'm calling and connecting to you, we have these things in place called codecs, and as long as we have the same codec in place, we're going to kind of default to that, and then that call quality is going to stay consistent across the board. The other thing to mention about that too is that there's other components in the network that have to support those higher level codecs, but for the most part, that stuff hasn't really been put out there for the public telephone networks. It's just been a little slow to make upgrades in that area. What also doesn't help too is the fact that we have cell phones here today, and if you're in an area with poor cell phone coverage, the quality is going to be really bad. It's going to be choppy. It's going to be robotic, and it just doesn't add to the overall experience. So I think we've actually gotten to the point now to where we've kind of gotten used to bad quality, and then and that's even the reason why we've defaulted to sending a text message first, because it's just a lot easier not to deal with somebody who's talking on the phone and you can hardly hear them. Now you will actually get better call quality if you're using a couple of different things. So for instance, we'll go ahead and take this to the business phone system. So if we're on the same phone system in an office, and then we choose to use higher quality phone settings between our phones, we'll get improved phone quality. But that also comes with using additional bandwidth, and then there has to be some other settings and parameters in place to support those higher quality calls. Another way that we can get higher quality calls is to use some of the messaging apps that we talked about a little bit earlier. So for instance, if you and I are on WhatsApp, we can actually get a higher quality call because of the fact that they're using some higher quality codecs, and those are the codecs are what makes the calls sound a lot better compared to your traditional phone calls over those type of networks. But they use higher quality settings by default, and then when we initiate a call with one another, we default to that, and then it just sounds a lot better. It's almost like HD sound quality coming through your ears. That's the best way I can describe it. So those messaging apps use a higher call quality settings by default. The traditional phone networks, they have to support a number of different call quality settings, and the network itself, it's not to the point to where it's going to support that, because it has to support so many other legacy services and features. And at some point in time, when these networks are completely upgraded and the older stuff is retired, maybe that's when call quality will get a little bit better. But until that time, it's probably not going to happen soon enough. So if you want a better call, jump on some of these other messaging apps where you can get that better and higher call quality. All right, so we've come to the end of the show. I really appreciate you for hanging and listening to me today as I bring you the news. I hope this brings a lot of value to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. Once again, Jamal@thephoneguy.com. If you want to reach out to me on social media, I'm on pretty much most social platforms. So hit me up there if you have any questions or concerns. If you want to leave a rating or review about the show, go ahead and feel free to do it. And if you want to provide any feedback to, let me know. I'm open. I'm hoping I'm getting better with this while you're listening. And I hope this is a little bit enjoyable, as well as I hope that you're learning and taking some things away. So I really appreciate your time. I thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.